Welcome to the Daily Report for July 29th, 2024. I'm John Dickerson. Chief Justice John Roberts referred to the Supreme Court as the functioning branch of government. Not so functioning, says the current occupant of the executive branch. President Biden Monday proposed a set of changes to the High Court. The list ranges from pure campaign stunts to legitimate offerings. We'll try to figure out which is which. There are 99 days of campaigning to go before the voting stops, and 99 bottles of beer won't be enough for some people to make it through. We'll have a presidential campaign update with our Robert Costa. Out in the churning world, there's also a lot to look at today. Dana Jacobson of CBS Saturday Morning will file a report from the Paris Olympics. From Israel, the latest report after the attack by Hezbollah sets off another spasm of concern about a wider Middle East war. And Venezuela. It's currently experiencing the largest displacement crisis ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere. Many are coming to the U.S. southern border. We'll have the latest on the election in Venezuela. And we'll have plenty of other news of the day, which includes an apparent crisis in creativity in the retail industry. They're already advertising Halloween in July. The only explanation is they've run out of ideas. The Daily Report starts in a moment. Well, hello. Thank you for joining us. We begin our report with a call for order in the court. President Biden Monday suggested a list of reforms to the Supreme Court. In an op-ed for the Washington Post, he criticized the conservative justice's recent decision to grant presidents immunity for official acts and cited what he calls a crisis of ethics. Biden wrote, quote, "We can and must prevent the abuse of presidential power and restore the public's faith in our judicial system." He suggests three changes: a constitutional amendment limiting presidential immunity, a binding and enforceable code of ethics for justices, and term limits for Supreme Court justices who currently enjoy lifetime appointments. President Biden spoke about his proposal Monday while commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act.
The court is not self-policing. The court is not dealing with the obvious conflicts of interest. We need a mandatory code of ethics for the Supreme Court, and we need it now.
And Jed Sugarman joins me now. He's a professor at Boston University School of Law. Jed, let's start with this immunity, the constitutional amendment. Is that realistic or even a practical suggestion, do you think?
Well, just a reminder that it takes 2/3 of each house of Congress and then 3/4 of the states. So it is not at all realistic that a presidential immunity amendment will pass anytime soon. But it is good politics. And there is a slight chance that if Trump loses and that we have President Harris, some number of Republicans to get to 2/3 might say, hey, we actually like the idea of keeping checks and balances on a president. I don't think that chance is high, but it's possible.
All right, I want to spin through some of these others, even though I've got a follow-up on that one. But let's go to this ethics problem question. How much of a problem do the Supreme Court justices have? Is it, and is the problem that they have that there are specific ethics clashes? So, for example, Justice Thomas, his wife was involved, at least at some level, in an effort to overturn the election. Or is the ethics challenge a general mindset that various justices, some more than others certainly, have operated as if they're sort of got their own set of rules?
I think the attention on this is triggered by the recent scandals with Harlan Crow and Justice Thomas, as well as Justice Alito. And it's not so long ago that Abe Fortas was attempted to be elevated to replace Earl Warren from an associate justice to a chief justice, and a much more minor ethics scandal meant that he had to not only withdraw his name from that chief justice appointment, but he had to resign from the court. And that was over a much more minor question of ethics. So that was just 50 years ago. So a lot has changed in terms of the idea that the media or that public opinion can be a check on the justices. I think there's a real sense that the justices don't really care about public opinion, that they care about a base, and the base doesn't really care about this.
And the Abe Fortas nomination by a Democratic president late in an election year was, of course, blocked when President Obama tried to do the same thing, another norm that has shifted. Let me ask you about term limits. This seems legitimately interesting. When the court was formed, justices didn't live as long as they live now. The court played a different role in American life. How do you see the question of term limits? And not necessarily, well, A, is it wise? But then B, how has it changed with respect to the origin of the court?
Well, first of all, I think one pivotal change is that up until about 1970, the average justice spent 15 years on the court, which is less than 18. Just to do some basic math. Yeah. What changed after 1970 is with health care, enjoying national health care, the justices have now served 26 years on average. For example, Scalia and Kennedy served about 30 years. Roberts and Alito have been on the court for almost 20 years each. So I think that this is partly a response to this being a recurring issue of just about how long justices are serving. I think the second thing that's triggering this is less about the term limit length, how long the justices are serving, and how justices manipulate the retirements when their party in power or when their president comes back into power. So again, a little bit of history here. There was reporting that Justice O'Connor, when she was watching the 2000 election and it looked like Gore was going to defeat Bush, she said privately, "Oh no, I can't retire." And lo and behold, a month later, she is part of the 5-4 decision that puts Bush into office. And then lo and behold, not in those next 4 years, partly because I think she was chastened by that revelation, but she waits until 2005 when Bush wins re-election. So that's one example among many. Kennedy retired right when he was promised there were some conversations behind closed doors. And so I think part of what the proposal is aiming towards is a regularized appointment that every 2 years there's one appointment and every president gets two. That's the best part of this proposal. I think there are many problems with it, but I think that's the part that deserves commending.
Jed Sugarman with Boston University Law School, thank you so much for being with us. We are less than 100 days away from the election, and just 8 days ago, Vice President Kamala Harris became the likely Democratic presidential nominee. In that short period, the Harris campaign says it has raised $200 million, some of it through massive fundraising Zoom calls, one of which attracted, reportedly 200,000 attendees, making it the largest Zoom call meeting in history. To put all this fundraising in perspective, Biden's reelection campaign raised $51 million for the entire month of April. Harris's team says 66% of the donations came from first-time donors. More than 170,000 new volunteers signed up to support the Harris campaign. For more on this, CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins me now. Bob, before we get to Harris and what's happening with her, I want to start with something that Donald Trump said. You've covered him so long and so closely. So let's start with something he said recently to an event with Christian conservatives, and I'll ask you a question on the other side.
Get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote.
I've attended a lot of social conservative gatherings. I've never heard anyone refer to them as my beautiful Christians, but that's not the question, Bob. The question is, some have interpreted this as, on the one hand, the former president making an inflated boast, as he often does, about every possible problem will be solved once I'm in office. Others have heard it as an admission that basically there will be no more elections because the president has an affinity for authoritarianism. How do you, given your experience in reporting, how do you read it?
John, good to be with you. Former President Trump is someone who has always been focused on winning and winning for himself. I remember in 2016 when he kept being urged by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie to work on the transition project, to try to think through some appointees. He said, no, no, no. My entire focus is not on that. It would be in some way jinxing my chances if I fixate on anything except winning the election. And you see here, he's not focused on the democratic system of this country or the history and importance of voting. It's about rallying evangelical voters to make sure they show up at the ballot box this November and give him a second term in the White House. And some voters might hear this phrase and this kind of talk and hear incoherence. Some might hear a disregard for the American voting system, and he's not putting an emphasis on voting, it seems, in 2028 or 2032. But it's hard to read anybody's mind, especially former President Donald Trump. And you see here, just at the very least, it's evident someone who is so focused on trying to get his core coalition and core voters to show up because he knows that's the only way to win. And he is someone who has tested the bounds of constitutional power in this country, pressuring his own vice president to overturn the election in January of 2021. So the fear among his critics is it's not unwarranted when they hear a quote like this. At the same time, talking to Trump allies, they sometimes don't know what he's talking about when he makes these kind of statements.
Let me ask you about his vice presidential choice. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said on Sunday on Face the Nation that picking J.D. Vance was, quote, one of the best things Trump ever did for Democrats. Now, obviously, that's spin. You're not going to have a Democratic Majority Leader say it was a great idea for the Republican. But what's your reporting tell you about how the J.D. Vance pick is playing out? Is it working in some ways, not working in others? What's happening?
Well, objectively, it's not playing out well in some corners of social media. He is being ridiculed for past statements he has made. He is being sharply criticized for talking about childless Americans and why do they have prominence in the American political system. This has raised the ire of not only Democrats, but some Republicans and independents who say this kind of talk is politically unhelpful and perhaps offensive to many, many people. At the same time, inside the Trump campaign, there's not real concern about Vance because this entire campaign, in their view, is about Trump. And the whole Vance pick comes down to somebody who could help in Western Pennsylvania. And if working voters in Western Pennsylvania, in Southern Michigan, and different parts of Wisconsin feel in any way compelled to show up because Vance is on the ticket and he's someone who understands working people, then it's a help for the Trump campaign. But he's being attacked, and he's going to have his record questioned, his statements questioned. Governor Andy Beshear of Kentucky saying he's not a real representative of people who come from Appalachia or people who come from the industrial Midwest. So welcome to Major League Baseball and politics, Senator Vance. But he's not going to wash out, from what I've been told from Trump allies, because the drama of this is dramatic on social media, but this is no Tom Eagleton 1972.
A reference to the 18 days served by the Democratic nominee for vice president. Final question for you, Bob. There was a checklist of things that Vice President Harris had to do immediately in that first week. A lot of people think that she took care of that checklist. What's on the checklist now for the second week, for this period between the sugar high of the first few days and then, of course, the Democratic convention?
I have an interesting answer to this in the sense of everyone's talking about vice presidential picks. Okay, understandable. It's interesting. But to me, based on my conversations with top Democrats, the number one thing on her to-do list is labor. President Biden has spent so much time, and he spent a career building a relationship with organized labor to make sure that they're showing up in Michigan, they're showing up in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I mean, so much of the campaign has been about him going to union halls just to say, you better come out. You've come out for me since 1972. You better come out for me again. If she in any way sees a deflation of support among organized labor members, she's going to have a very tough time winning those key battleground states. So for her, it's about keeping that Biden coalition together. Yes, she has enthusiasm. Yes, it could draw new people in, but it's going to be about organized labor at the end of the day in many of these places.
Robert Costa keeping his eye on the ball in Washington. Bob, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Text messages first obtained by the New York Times reveal counter snipers knew about the gunman who attempted to assassinate former President Donald Trump earlier than is previously known. The texts show officers were first informed of a suspicious individual more than 90 minutes before the shooting, more than 60 minutes than previously reported. That individual is confirmed to have been 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks. Meanwhile, the former president has agreed to sit for an interview with the FBI as part of the shooting investigation. The agency said Monday it still does not have a clear motive for the shooting. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane reports from Capitol Hill. Scott?
The FBI hasn't released a date for this, but they've confirmed former President Trump has agreed to sit for a victim's interview as they probe the July 13th assassination attempt. They say it's a standard victim's interview, as is conducted in other FBI criminal investigations. But clearly, this is no standard victim, and this is no standard investigation. According to the FBI, they are still searching for the motive of Thomas Crooks' shooting, what led him to do it. But they do know from the early stages of their probe that he did careful planning, conducted internet searches about the recent assassination attempt of a Slovak prime minister, about how far Lee Harvey Oswald was when he shot and killed JFK. They also said he made a lot of purchases, including using an alias. Dozens of purchases of firearms-related equipment and chemicals. And to that end, the FBI says they found 2 explosive devices in Crooks' car at the site of the assassination attempt. And they say those devices didn't go off because they were set to the off position. Also released tonight from a U.S. Senator's office, more text messages from local police indicating there was a breakdown in communication, that the alerts that were supposed to go out about Thomas Crooks after he appeared suspicious many minutes before the shooting didn't get to the right people in time. They warned of Crooks more than 30 minutes before the bullets flew that he seemed suspicious and out of place. To that end, the Secret Service director, the acting director, testifies here tomorrow about what failures occurred and what their internal probe has produced so far. John?
Thank you, Scott. Scott McFarland on Capitol Hill. Iowa's strict abortion law is now in effect. It prohibits the procedure after a fetal heartbeat is detected. That happens at roughly 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is before some women even know they're pregnant. The law allows for limited exceptions in the cases of rape, incest, fetal abnormality, or when the life of the mother is threatened. Previously, abortion was legal in Iowa up to 20 weeks into a pregnancy. The ban passed by Iowa Republicans in a special session last year and was signed into law by Governor Kim Reynolds. Iowa is now the 4th state that bans abortions at the 6-week mark. Abortion and reproductive rights have become one of the central issues of the election following the Supreme Court's reversal of Roe v. Wade in 2022. California's park fire has grown to one of the largest in state history. As of Monday evening, it has burned through 370,000 acres. That's roughly half the size of the state of Rhode Island. It's the biggest fire in California since 2020 and the 6th largest ever in the Golden State. At least 100 structures have been destroyed by the fire, and more than 4,000 others remain at risk. Officials say it was sparked by a man pushing a burning car into a gully. Our Jonathan Vigliotti joins us now from Chico, California, just south of where that fire is burning. Jonathan, what do we know about the man who sparked this fire?
Yeah, John, and good evening to you. We're standing in the burn scar of the fire that police say was intentionally set by this man. His name is Ronnie Stout, 42 years old, from here in Chico. According to investigators, he set his car on fire, then pushed it into a ditch before leaving the scene. He was quickly caught, arrested, charged with felony arson. He's actually in court as we speak, appearing for his arraignment. We did speak with one of the witnesses that called police, alerting them to Stout. She claims he appeared to be recklessly driving and then crashed. It's unclear if Stout's defense will use this as their defense. It's also currently unclear what evidence the prosecution has. What is clear is the scale of loss. More than 370,000 acres. That's the size of the city of Los Angeles, the 5th largest fire here in the state. And then, as you mentioned, more than 100 structures lost. Many of them, we are hearing, are homes, and thousands of people, as many as 10,000 people at this hour, still under a mandatory evacuation as fire crews continue to battle this blaze. Flames in some areas up to 100 feet, though they have had a break in the weather. Yesterday, the wind calmed down. They have gained 12% containment, nearly 5,000 crews now here on the scene. We're told this fire could continue to burn for several weeks, John.
Jonathan Vigliotti in Chico, California. Thank you very much, Jonathan. When we come back, voters in Venezuela are taking to the streets to make their feelings known, claiming their voices were suppressed during the presidential election over the weekend. We'll explain what they're saying and why they're saying it and what it means for the country. Plus, the United States is already making its mark at the Olympics. We've got an update on how Team USA is performing in Paris. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Coming up, our series. Wait a minute. Tom, is that you working the camera?
Keep leaning out of your close-up.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I had progressively fallen deeper into the world of online sports betting.
The risk is the rush.
What do you think is driving the spike in popularity?
I think it's legality.
If it's legal, I'm going to use it. There are ways to bet when you are 18.
We've created an epidemic of child gambling.
You can't walk into a male dormitory in a college campus without sports betting happening.
It's America's most neglected problem.
I used sports betting as a way to escape, when in reality, I'm choosing self-destruction. Whatever I had left, it was gone.
The purpose of the industry is to get you to play to extinction. And that means until all your money is gone.
Go to the ends of the earth. Reach for the stars.
Yeah, I just took off. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's pretty good. Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
That desired farm is a wonderful place to raise children, and it still is.
Promises broken.
Black Americans have been the target of racism and discrimination pretty much from the time they acquired ownership in the land.
Costing black farmers hundreds of billions in generational wealth.
They did everything to make sure we were run off that land.
But communities are uniting to continue the fight.
Collective ownership is powerful.
To keep their land and their dreams alive.
To watch my children play on land that we own means everything.
So land is power.
Most definitely.
40 Acres and a Mule, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
People with developmental disabilities were once sequestered by the hundreds of thousands in institutions.
Many of our fellow citizens are suffering tremendously because lack of attention, lack of imagination, lack of adequate manpower.
Disability activists have since torn down barriers blocking them from living at home or in the community.
We conclude that Title II of the ADA requires states to provide community-based treatment for persons with mental disabilities.
But of the 16,000 people who remain in state-operated institutions, half are in 5 states, and Illinois is one of them.
I don't want to live in the institution. It makes me feel discriminated against.
Do you think there are people living in institutions in Illinois that don't need to be living there?
Yeah, because they're proving it as soon as they get out.
A spokeswoman for the National Security Council says the United States is working on a diplomatic response to a rocket attack in northern Israel Saturday that killed 12 children and teens. Israel and the U.S. have both blamed Hezbollah for the strike. Officials from both countries say military intelligence shows the rockets were launched from an area controlled by the group. CBS News foreign correspondent Deborah Pata has more from East Jerusalem. Deborah?
The attack in a Druze village in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights has once again raised the specter of a full-blown regional war. 12 children were blown apart when a Hezbollah rocket slammed into a soccer pitch in Majd al-Shams. They were laid to rest in a long row of white-shrouded coffins as thousands of villagers filled the town center. We spoke to first responders who described a scene of pure hell, saying they had found only dead children. Israel and Hezbollah have been trading fire since October 7. This has reignited fears of an all-out war. While Israel struck deep inside Lebanon immediately after the attack, today Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised an even harsher response. But in the village caught in Hezbollah's firing line, there are some who want revenge, but many more who just want the bloodshed to stop. The U.S. is urging restraint on all sides, worried this attack is the nightmare scenario it's been warning about that could trigger, John, full-blown war.
Deborah Pata in East Jerusalem, thank you. At least 2 children were killed and 11 other people were injured in a stabbing in northwest England on Monday. The attack happened at a yoga and dance event for kids. A 17-year-old boy was arrested for the attack, but a motive is still unclear. English authorities are not treating it as an incident of terrorism. We're only a few days into the Paris Olympics, but the United States is making its presence known early. The men's gymnastics team won bronze in the team event Monday. It was the first time the men's team has medaled since the 2008 Games in Beijing. The win adds to the United States' already impressive medal count. The Team USA has won 20 medals so far, the most among all 206 countries participating in the Games. But while they lead overall, the U.S. is falling behind in gold. Japan is leading the way with 6 so far, followed by China and South Korea, who both have 5. The United States has 3 gold medal wins in swimming and fencing. Dana Jacobson joins us now from Paris. She's a co-host of CBS Saturday Morning and a CBS News and sports correspondent. Dana, you had the opportunity to talk to one of the gold medal winners. Tell us about that.
John, it was actually silver medal, but even as she was said, she's not disappointed. It doesn't matter. It's a medal. It's an Olympic medal. We would all kill to have one of those. And Lauren Scruggs actually won her silver with her teammate, Lee Kiefer, taking the gold. So it was this very interesting setup in the final of the women's foil. 2 Americans facing off. It was the first time that had ever happened. And I asked Scruggs what it was like going into that final.
I didn't feel any sort of pressure compared to the rest of the day. I just wanted to fence out there one last time in front of that crazy crowd and just, make history.
Do you have a snapshot moment from that final?
Just like taking off my mask and seeing, everyone clapping and cheering was just insane.
And she said it's really just starting to sink in right now. Lauren Scruggs actually is the first black woman to ever win a medal in fencing for the U.S. And she really is relishing that role, John, of, being the woman to look up to. She says not just for women and girls of color, but for all women and girls to go out there and be fierce. She even joked, more girls, get into fencing. There aren't a lot of them in there.
And I love the face masks with the American flag on them. What else, Dana, stood out to you on Monday, or any other thing that might have stood out to you?
Yeah, well, you mentioned the men's gymnastics team, which is really amazing when you think about the drought that they had. And also, keep in mind, they were in 5th in qualifying, so they had to jump 2 other teams to get that bronze medal. And it was that true team performance where each man did what he had to do, and that doesn't always happen. Women's hoops was finally on the court. I got to watch a little bit of that online. Wasn't able to watch it in person. But it was really cool to see them just gel together. Remember, there was all that talk about Caitlin Clark and what would happen. She should be on the team. She should be on the team. They don't need her right now. And Caitlin's amazing, but they absolutely blew out Japan. They've got a 56-game winning streak. It goes back to Barcelona in 1992. I remember those games. I know a lot of people are younger than me and don't, but that's just an incredible streak. And then the old guys. Well, not really. In tennis terms, I guess you could say. Rafael Nadal, a lot of people are talking that this is the end for him. Well, he faced Novak Djokovic today. And this is, the meeting that everybody wants to see. It was the total buzz here. Their 60th meeting. Nadal would rally late. I talked to a couple of the women that were there from the U.S., and they were saying it was incredible, and the crowd was on his side, and he really got going. And then, of course, Joker comes back, and he wins, and not a problem. And he even was taunting the Nadal fans in the crowd, which seemed to be pretty much vintage Joker. But I don't know if it's the last time we've seen him on the red clay court, but 14 singles titles, I believe, in the French Open there. So if it was the last time, it's an okay way to go.
And I saw one of the forehands he hit, which looked like, vintage. What an amazing player. Dana Jacobson, thank you so much. Looking forward to talking to you for the next dispatch. Have fun in Paris.
I'll be here. Thanks, John.
One Catholic charity in El Paso, Texas, is doing its part to help migrants in need, but Texas state officials are looking to shut down their operations. Our own Camila Montoya Galvez joins us after the break to tell us more about this ongoing battle. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Going our places, bright, shiny faces.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team. Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
It didn't seem like anything could happen, because nothing ever happens in East Palestine, but it did.
Authorities released toxic fumes from 5 derailed train cars.
Resident, please evacuate.
Acute bronchitis due to chemical fumes. Did you ever have these problems before the derailment? No, ma'am.
This neighborhood's not safe no more.
We can assure the community that there's not vinyl chloride entering their communities.
Then why are there so many people feeling these various symptoms of bloody noses or difficulty breathing, bronchitis?
That's a hard question to answer.
We're talking about one of the most blatant releases of a mixture of some of the most toxic chemicals that we've seen in America.
I feel like now I have a duty to warn other communities. If my daughter has to watch me die of cancer, at least it saves someone else. This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform.
You can be really old at 60, and you can be really young at 85.
Inspire.
How do we unlock the power within ourselves to be who we want to be?
And brighten your day.
The best part of fame is making people feel good. Always send the people home happy.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Dragon capsule here in space.
Sightseers in space, the thrill of a lifetime.
Seeing the Earth from space, it was so exhilarating.
But the risks that come with the territory.
There have been 4 fatal accidents. That's a 1% fatal accident rate.
Might make you look before you launch.
If you had 1 out of 100 airplanes falling out of the sky, we'd have a public crisis.
Space tourism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm John Dickerson. Here are some additions to our top stories. President Biden is pushing for several reforms to the Supreme Court, including term limits, an ethics code for justices, and a constitutional amendment limiting presidential immunity. However, the proposals are unlikely to become policies amid a divided Congress with less than 100 days until the election. The FBI says former President Donald Trump has agreed to be interviewed about the assassination attempt against him earlier this month. The agency says it will be a standard victim interview, but it's unclear when it will take place. So far, the FBI has conducted 450 interviews. As part of the investigation, no motive still recognizable. Vice President Kamala Harris has won the endorsement of nearly 24 current and former mayors in Arizona, a key swing state. The group includes leaders of several border communities and the mayor of Phoenix, who also serves as the president of the Democratic Mayors Association. The issue of immigration has led to tensions between the federal government and the states, between border governors and big city mayors. And our immigration reporter Camila Montoya Galvez is in El Paso, Texas, reporting on a legal fight between a decades-old Catholic charity and state officials. And it's alarming faith-based volunteers who say their religion requires them to help migrants in need.
Prayer is paramount at this shelter. Before enjoying hearty meals cooked by American volunteers, migrants pray for those still trying to reach the U.S. Ruben Garcia founded the Annunciation House Shelter Network.
This is Christian, it is Jewish, it is Muslim. Constitutive to each of those faith traditions is I was a stranger and you're welcome to me.
The Annunciation House here in El Paso has been sheltering and feeding migrants since 1978. For many, this is the first stop to get dry clothing, food, and a warm place to sleep. But it is now at risk of being shut down by the state of Texas.
Earlier this year, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton asked the court to close Annunciation House, calling the Catholic charity a stash house. But a judge rejected that request, denouncing Texas's actions as harassment. Republican Governor Greg Abbott and the Attorney General have been battling the Biden administration over how to handle the influx of migrants at the border.
The state of Texas has no reason to want to come after an NGO whose entire history has been dedicated to human rights. I think it's happening because of the politics.
The Attorney General's office, which did not respond to a series of questions, is appealing the order against its bid to shut down Annunciation House, a prospect that could leave migrants like Wilson Juarez Hernandez in limbo. The 22-year-old has been living here since surviving a fire inside a Mexican immigration detention center that killed 40 migrants last year. You lost many friends that day in the fire. The smoke Wilson inhaled disabled him. For some time, he could not eat, bathe, or dress himself. He's now learning to do all of that again and learning English.
What is your favorite word in English?
Happy. Happy. Feliz. Happy is your favorite word. With no family in the U.S., Annunciation House is where Wilson feels happy. Camilo Montoya Galvez, CBS News, El Paso.
And Camilo joins us now. He filed that from El Paso, but he's in Tucson, Arizona. He's all over the place. Camilo, explain the legal argument on the behalf of the state here about why it's going after shelters like this.
Hi, John. Texas's main legal premise is that shelters like the Annunciation House in El Paso are facilitating illegal immigration by feeding and sheltering migrants. The state is accusing the Annunciation House of violating state laws by arguing that it is operating as a stash house for migrants and that it is also harboring people who enter the country illegally, John, and who evaded apprehension by federal immigration officials. These are the so-called gotaways. And the state is not filing criminal charges yet, but it is taking civil action, John, to try to shut down the Annunciation House. And that could be a real possibility that could impact the broader region of El Paso because the Annunciation House is the main shelter system there. And this is part of a broader accusation, John, that Republican lawmakers have levied against shelters and other NGOs that are helping migrants because their argument is that by creating these inducements, as they would argue, feeding and sheltering people, that is contributing to the humanitarian crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border. But as you heard in our piece, people like Ruben Garcia, the director of Annunciation House, argue that all they are doing, John, is helping desperate people in need.
And Camilla, let me just grab that one point, which is, it seems like there's a specific argument being made against, say, Annunciation House. They are sheltering specifically certain kinds of people. But then there seems to be a broader kind of ideological argument, which you just touched on, which is any group helping migrants is a kind of a pull factor. Yes. Do I have that right?
That is right, and it is also very important to underscore, John, that this is not an isolated incident. We know that Texas Governor Greg Abbott has instructed Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton to investigate NGOs and groups throughout the state who are sheltering migrants, and we know that they are investigating at least one other Catholic charity, the Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley, which is the largest shelter system in another part of Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, that has also been historically one of the main corridors for illegal immigration crossings by migrants. And the state is asking a court to retrieve documents from this NGO because they believe that this group is facilitating illegal immigration. But just like the Annunciation House, this group says that they are only helping people, John, who are hungry, who are desperate, and who need basic services.
Camilo Montoya Galvez in Arizona. Thank you very much, Camilo. Venezuela's incumbent president, Nicolas Maduro, has claimed victory in a highly contentious election over the weekend after hours of delays in announcing the results. Maduro's loyalists on the National Electoral Council claimed he secured more than 51% of the vote. His main opponent, Edmundo Gonzalez, apparently won 44%, but opposition groups say that tally does not reflect the actual results and that their polling shows Gonzalez is the real victor. CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano has the latest from Caracas, Venezuela. Have also held back in recognizing Maduro's apparent victory. In addition to the country's recent history with voter suppression, the results were announced before votes from 30,000 polling booths nationwide were counted. There are growing international calls for a transparent, independent review of the election. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken was among the international officials to express doubt, saying he has, quote, serious concerns that the result announced does not reflect the will of the voters or of the Venezuelan people. Protests have started in the streets of Caracas, and you're seeing video now from our CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano, who I mentioned earlier. She and her team were forced to don protective vests and gas masks as police and protesters clashed on the streets nearby. Ryan Berg joins me now. He's director of the Americas program and head of the Future of Venezuela initiative at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much for being with us. So, are the calls of what's the foundation of these claims that the election was rigged?
Well, good evening, John. It's great to be with you. I think the fundamental point to make here is that the regime took hours, even hours past when it said it was going to announce the results, to announce any kind of results. When it did announce results, it said that they were both irreversible as well as showing a victory for Nicolás Maduro. But what the regime had done before that cast quite a bit of a lack of credibility on these elections, which is to say, stealing many of the ballot boxes at polling places and not allowing the opposition, which had put together a very large coalition of witnesses at each of these polling places, to actually look at the vote tallies from each of the polling places. It is part of national law in Venezuela that each polling place is supposed to produce a final tally. They did not do that, and the regime has not allowed any of those final tallies to be seen. The opposition was able to make away with some of those tallies before the regime was able to get their hands on them. And what the opposition is saying, as well as many credible pollsters who have done exit polls, showing a massive landslide victory for the opposition. However, there was this long waiting period, a lot of doubt, and then the regime seemed to come up with some numbers out of thin air without actually proving with any kind of paper trail those numbers. And so that's the fundamental crux of the problem.
Can anything be done, Ryan?
Well, every country that has cast doubt on the validity of this vote has said that they want transparency. They will recognize Maduro as the president of Venezuela if he shows transparently that he won the election. The fact that the regime hasn't done that yet has made many who are asking for this transparency to feel like this has been a highly rigged election. And you can see that in the results. You just showed some videos of Venezuelans spontaneously pouring into the street to protect their landslide vote for the opposition. Much of this is driven by the indignation that the regime would simply make up a number or fabricate a number out of thin air. And so I think we're going to see days now of protests, again, driven by indignation about the way that this election was handled by the Maduro regime.
And as a final question, Maduro came into power in 2013, and under his government, Venezuela has seen this mass exodus. Just to give you the numbers quickly, U.S. Customs and Border Protection said that there were only 80 Venezuelan migrants at the border in 2014. Within the first 8 months of 2024, 217,000 Venezuelan migrants came through. How much of that can be laid at the foot of Maduro's policies, that exodus?
Almost all of it, John, because the problem here is that people have lost hope. This election actually rebuilt a lot of that lost hope. The expectations for this election were astronomical, and I can only imagine what the street feels today to be let down once again, not because they didn't come out to vote and express their right to vote, because the regime likely stole another election from them in a series of stolen elections. So what we expect to see in the coming months is another outpouring of migration as people start to lose hope that they can make a life for themselves in Venezuela.
Ryan Bird from the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Thank you so much, Ryan.
Thanks.
The FDA has approved a new tool in the fight against colon cancer. We'll speak with our Dr. John LaPook about the new blood test and who it may benefit. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discovery, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
The FDA has approved a new blood test for detecting colon cancer. The Shield test was produced by California-based medical company Guardant Health and is for adults age 45 and older. The approval comes after a clinical study found the test could correctly detect colon cancer in 83% of participants who were not experiencing symptoms. While the test was available if doctors wanted it for their patients, it cost nearly $900 out of pocket. It's now expected to be covered by private and government insurance, including Medicare. CBS News chief medical correspondent John LaPook joins us now. John, what should we know about this specific test?
Well, the 83% is an important number. So 83% sensitivity means it's picking up 83% of cancers, okay? And it mostly was stage 2, 3, and 4. It wasn't as good with stage 1 cancers, the earliest ones, and you kind of want something to pick up the earliest, and it's not very good at all for benign polyps. To put this in perspective, the gold standard is a colonoscopy. Colonoscopy, you're actually looking and said, I'm a gastroenterologist, I've done thousands of them. You look inside, you're not only diagnosing colon cancer at an early stage, you're finding benign polyps, and you pluck them out, and then instead of potentially over years turning into colon cancer, they're in a jar, and they don't develop into colon cancer. So it's a diagnostic tool and you're preventing colon cancer. Then there are the stool tests, Cologuard, the FIT, the stool guaiac test, looking for blood or combination of blood and genetic material.
And these are trying to get you out of essentially having to go do the gold standard thing.
Well, because a lot of people say, I don't want to do that. So they'll do the stool test. There's the ick factor. I don't want to be dealing with stool and putting it in a container and sending it in. So now you have a blood test. So the blood test is another choice. And, you have another tool in the toolbox to say to people, look, gold standard is this, colonoscopy. You can also do a stool test, and also you can do the blood test. And there is a 10% false positive rate. What does that mean? 10% of the positive results, you'll be told you have colon cancer, but you don't have colon cancer. Now, of course, you're going to be anxious, but what do? You do a colonoscopy. And then you can find out, oh, okay, I don't. You went through that period between when you got the result and when you got the colonoscopy where you're anxious, but at least you can then follow up and say, okay, I don't have colon cancer.
Back to the stool tests.
Right.
Did those go through as rigorous a vetting process as the blood test? In other words, for the people who basically don't want to yet go to your office for the colonoscopy.
Yeah, they have been looked at extensively, and we know what the sensitivity is and what the specificity, what the pros, what the cons are. I mean, Cologuard's a pretty good test. That's the combination of genetic material and stool blood, the invisible blood. You can't see it. Right. And it does pretty well. It has a high sensitivity rate for picking up colon cancer. But the best test is the screening test is the one that's actually done. And a lot of people don't do it. And in fact, about 40% of people they're not up to date with screening. And colon cancer, as you know, it's the second leading killer of men and women combined. And up to about 53,000 people are expected to die this year.
But if you get a colonoscopy,
well, you absolutely save lives with colonoscopy. Right. So whatever it is that the screening test that you're going to do, don't die of embarrassment. Use your words, talk to your healthcare provider, and get screened. Whatever the test is, get screened.
Dr. John LaPoop, thank you, John. Let's give them pumpkin to talk about. U.S. retailers are jumping on Summerween. It's a trend to sell candy and decorations months before Halloween. It's a disaster. We'll explain what's behind this madness.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now. We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are. Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
I'm open to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Haitians are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's gonna be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm gonna remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was gonna be born, he was only gonna live for 30 minutes.
It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Have you noticed stores starting to put out Halloween decor early? Halloween, as you may remember, comes in October. Well, this is something called Summerween. The holiday originated in the animated Disney show Gravity Falls in 2012. Traditions for Summerween include carving watermelons instead of pumpkins. Halloween itself, of course, which is behind all of this, is a major source of profits for big retailers. According to the National Retail Federation, Halloween sales drew in more than $12 billion last year. Just over half of that was in candy. So, companies that have already unveiled summer Halloween products include Target, Michaels, Costco, and more. And once spooky season actually rolls around, you can probably expect the winter holiday decorations to do so too. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. President Biden is calling for major changes to the Supreme Court, but turning them into reality won't be very easy. A closer look at the president's proposals and the obstacles they face. Plus, the FBI secures one of the most important interviews. It's interviewing former President Trump. And Team USA shines on the world stage. A report from Paris as more and more athletes score Olympic medals. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this.
What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told